Americans have begun voting in a critical midterm election that could decide the political future of Donald Trump. The Democrats, who sit in the opposition, want to balance the scales in the U.S. Congress. If they win, they could derail President Trump's legislative agenda. If the U.S. president secures a victory, he would be emboldened and could attempt more misadventures both at home and abroad. The poll battle in America is our cover story tonight. An election that the world is watching. Midterm polls are a prestige battle for Donald Trump.
And we will make America great again.
Trump is fighting to keep control of the U.S. Congress. Controlling the American Parliament is key to his agenda.
This is one of the most important elections of our entire lives. This election will decide whether we build on the extraordinary prosperity that we've achieved or whether we let the radical Democrats take control of Congress and take a giant wrecking ball to our economy and to the future of our nation.
The Democrats are pulling out all stops to take Trump down.
What's up, Detroit?
If they gain control of the Congress, they could hurt Trump's agenda and begin impeachment proceedings.
Don't be hoodwinked. Don't be bamboozled. Don't fall for the okie doke. Because while they are distracting you with this fear-mongering, they're robbing you blind.
The Democrats consider this election as a make-or-break battle. They have campaigned hard, with some candidates even getting help from Hollywood stars.
I'm here today because of the men and because of the women who were lynched, who were humiliated, who were discriminated against, who were suppressed, who were repressed and oppressed for the right for the equality at the polls.
There are more than 400 electoral races in this year's midterm election, but the final result would come down to a few key battleground states. As Americans pick their new leaders, the world is watching what effect it has on Trump and his presidency. Bureau Report, World is One. And joining us tonight is a very special panel. We have Simon Marks, he's Wion's correspondent from Washington, D.C. Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, advisor to Donald Trump for the 2020 presidential campaign, also with us from Washington, D.C. And Michael A. Zillis, assistant professor of political science at the University of Kentucky, with us from Kentucky. Good evening to all of you. I hope you've all voted. Simon, let me begin with you. What's the buzz on the ground? Many are predicting a record voter turnout. Is this an indicator of which way the wind is blowing?
Oh, I must tell you, Molly, I don't get to vote here. I'm still not an American citizen, merely an observer. But what we are observing here in the United States today is what appears to be record turnout for a midterm election. Certainly voting has been very brisk here on the East Coast. It got underway, around 5 hours ago now in some states. And as the sun moves to the west, so polling stations are opening across the rest of the country. The big question, though, Molly, is how do you interpret that voter turnout? Republicans will look at it and say, well, it just shows people are absolutely determined to get out and stop what President Trump rather fancifully has described as radical democratic socialists from coming to power. Democrats will look at it and say their supporters are absolutely energized and determined to stop a polarizing president in his tracks. They want to deliver both houses of Congress into Democratic Party hands in order to reduce him to the status of a lame duck in the White House for the rest of his first term in office.
Lieutenant Rogers, the president is not contesting, but he's made this election about himself more than anything else. Is this then a referendum on Donald Trump and his presidency so far?
Look, I mean, he conceded that it's a referendum on his presidency some weeks ago. He's edged away from that in the course of the last few days. But every president goes into these midterm elections knowing that even though his name is not on the ballot, this is absolutely a referendum on the direction in which Donald Trump has taken the country since he moved into the Oval Office in January of 2017.
Michael, the big question that you ask in every election is this: who's winning? So let me put that to you.
Yeah, that's an important question, and it's a complicated question. At the House level, the lower body of Congress, right, polling in many cases looks somewhat favorable to the Democratic Party. There's all the House seats are up for election, and the Democrats are in strong position, although once again not in certain position. The story is actually the opposite in some of the Senate races, the upper chamber in the United States, where Republicans are in a bit stronger position. And so it's very possible, right, that at the end of the night tonight in the United States, that we have a split Congress with the Republicans in control of one chamber and the Democrats in control of another.
Lieutenant Rogers, Stephen Rogers, how do you rate Donald Trump's chances and why?
Very well. Believe we're going to pick up 3 to 4 seats in the Senate, and we will maintain a majority in the U.S. Congress. I could tell you this is a replay of President Trump's election to the presidency in 2016, where the polls are going one way, the people are going another. And I agree with your other guests. Record numbers of people are coming out to vote. 33 million have already voted before today, Election Day. So we're going to see a strong turnout, and I believe the president is going to do well.
Midterm elections aren't usually very good for sitting presidents. Simon, on the record, both sides say that they're going to win, but what do campaign strategists say off the record? Do they concede that this may be a difficult election for the president?
Well, we've been told that the president's advisors have been preparing him at the White House for the possibility that the Republicans will indeed lose the House of Representatives. I think they're more confident about the possibility of keeping the Senate, as we were just hearing there, the idea of a split Congress. But the other thing that we know that President Trump is absolutely preparing for later this week is some pretty big shifts among personnel within his cabinet. Once these midterm elections are past him, he sees these as a punctuation point in his presidency, and he wants to bring some new blood to the fore. So people like the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, perhaps the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, his absolutely embattled White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly, they may all find themselves on the outs as President Trump seeks to refresh his inner circle ahead of what is right round the corner, and that is the presidential campaign for 2020. Remember, this midterm election is just the starting point. This time next year, we'll all be talking about presidential politics.
Indeed, and it's interesting, the words you use. Michael, he says that the president's inner circle is preparing him for a possible loss. How does Donald Trump take a loss? And one can imagine that he'll only be blaming others for a loss, if indeed it is one.
Yeah, I think that scenario is interesting, right, in that a loss is definitely a benefit for the Democrats, I think, policy-wise, right, in the ability to limit the agenda of President Trump. But it may also be sort of a rhetorical benefit for the president if he is able to more directly point to Democrats as the cause of some failures of his agenda going forward if they put up some of these stop signs. And so one thing you could imagine is with the possibility of a loss, right, that Trump is going to even more aggressively, right, go after a potential Democratic House of Representatives as the ones that are responsible for thwarting his agenda.
Lieutenant Rogers, will this result determine Donald Trump's strategy for 2020? Is he prepared to recalibrate his strategy if need be?
Well, the strategy has always been America first. It's always been keeping the American people in the forefront of the campaigns. Promises made, promises kept. That's the motto, and he's kept every promise. Economy strong. Unemployment rate is at its lowest level in history. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the accomplishments of this president. So the strategy pretty much going to stay the same because it is a winning strategy.
If you say so. The president's ratings are hurting Republicans, some say, Simon, but at the same time, as Lieutenant Rogers said, the economy is booming, all the indicators are in the right place, and yet do you believe that the president's personal capital may be hurting the Republican Party?
As he did in 2016, Donald Trump has torn up the rule book of American politics during the course of this midterm election campaign. Not for him the age-old mission of trying to woo floating voters in the centre. Were he engaged in that, we would actually have heard him talk a lot more about the economy over the last few weeks and a lot less about the dog whistle that is the immigration caravan that is not about to invade the United States, despite the claims of the American president. Instead, he has focused on trying to get his core supporters out to the polls. That's a high-risk political strategy. He may well succeed in that endeavour. Let's not write him off, but let's wait until we see real votes being counted in a few hours' time to see just whether Donald Trump's unorthodox political strategy has brought him another win.
Michael, every presidency is a cult of personality, and this one is more than most others. Even if the Democrats were to win, do they have anyone to match Donald Trump in the next electoral battle?
Yeah, it's not clear, right? I think the Democrats have sort of an unclear field for 2020. There's certainly some Democrats that are very popular among the party, including some that are on the ballot this election that are potential candidates, but it's not clear exactly who that will be. And the other thing we've observed with Trump is that even though his approval rating is somewhat low, there's been a floor on his support of around 35 to 40 percentage points of the American public tending to approve of the job he's doing, right? And this is something that we increasingly see in sort of the partisan U.S. context. So he has this strong core of support to build on going forward. It's not exactly clear how the Democrats will go about countering that in 2020, but there will be active interest among a range of candidates.
Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, this has been a toxic campaign, as we've all seen, and President Donald Trump has made some very serious charges, very serious allegations against the Democrats. If the Republicans lose control of the Congress, is the president prepared to reach across the aisle and work with them to push his legislative agenda?
He has always reached across the aisle, especially on immigration. It is the Democrats who have hindered his ability to move forward. The fact of the matter is, reality on the ground, 25, 30, 35, up to 50,000 people showing up at these rallies. I've been to many of them. He has strong support on the ground, and I really believe it is the Democrats that are going to have to face reality after Election Day, and they're going to have to be looking for the president to work together for the benefit of this country as we move forward.
Simon, I want your comments on this, and also the fact that the last time the opinion polls got it horribly wrong. This time they say that the Democrats have an edge, but we've seen what happens sometimes. Is there a disconnect? Is the media still operating in an echo chamber?
Yeah, and that's why it's so difficult to predict the outcome of the next few hours. We don't know whether there's been any extensive outside interference by, for example, the Russian government, as we witnessed in 2016. There are certainly allegations of voter suppression efforts underway by Republicans in some states, and also allegations of shenanigans by Democrats in other states. That, coupled with the fact that the opinion pollsters got it so wrong in large measure back in 2016, I think has left everybody here trigger shy. They're not ready in large measure to engage in prognostications of where this is going to end up in a few hours' time. Let's watch real votes being counted across the country, and then we can all make our judgments afterwards.
That's a wise thing to do. Simon Marks, Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and Michael Azelis, thanks very much for joining us. And of course, the next few hours will tell us who wins this midterm election. But why is this election so important? Why is this midterm election in America becoming a talking point across the world? All through the day today, we have been getting questions from many of you. The most asked one is this: why are midterm polls in one country significant for the rest of the world? Over the course of the next few minutes, we'll try to answer some of the FAQs. Question number one: Why so much interest in this election? There is a lot that's at stake for Donald Trump. A victory or defeat in these elections can determine the next 2 years of Mr. Trump's presidency. If the Republicans lose control of the U.S. Congress, Trump can easily push new laws. In fact, that includes the new immigration rules, new laws on health care and tax regulations. A defeat will make life difficult for Donald Trump. Not only will he lose control over his legislative agenda, the American president could face impeachment proceedings over the Russia meddling probe. Through his own speeches, Trump has turned this contest into a referendum on his presidency. In his rallies, he said that a vote against the Republicans will push America back.
Democrats want to turn back the clock, put America in reverse, and give power back to a corrupt, selfish ruling class that only looks for power and for themselves. But we are not going back. We are only going forward. We need you to vote for a Republican House and a Republican Senate so we can continue this incredible movement, the greatest movement in political history.
Question number 2. What are the key issues? Healthcare, economy and immigration are the top 3. Since taking office in 2016, Donald Trump has led a major crackdown on immigrants. His policy decisions have been called populist and have found support across the country. Trump says that he has delivered on the promises he made 2 years ago. During campaigning, he attacked Democrats on immigration and the economy.
Democrats produce mobs. That's what they're doing. But we're winning. Republicans produce jobs. Very simple. Very simple. Democrats are inviting caravan after caravan of illegal aliens to pour into our country, overwhelming your schools, your hospitals, and your communities. If you want more caravans, if you want more crime, vote Democrat tomorrow.
The Democratic Party dismisses these charges, of course. They claim that Donald Trump has done more to divide America than unite it. Former U.S. President Barack Obama led the charge for the Blue Party. Listen into what he had to say.
While they're trying to distract you with all this stuff, they're robbing you blind. They'll be like, look, 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 caravan, caravan. Then they're giving tax cuts to their billionaire friends. Look, 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 whatever the thing's scary. And then they're sabotaging your health care. You can't fall for it.
Tomorrow we'll know who won that battle. That brings us to question number 3. What does this election mean for the rest of the world? Why should it care? Trump's reputation as president is at stake in this electoral battle. He's made it like this. The result of the midterm poll will determine how world leaders perceive Donald Trump going forward. If this goes in his favor, he'll be negotiating with his counterparts from a position of strength. A win will be a positive indicator for his chances for a second term in 2020. But a loss would make Donald Trump look weaker on the global stage. We cannot say who's going to win.